Does fate exist in One Piece? This might seem like an odd question at first, but fate might in fact be one of the most important elements in the mysteries of the story, and as such, it is vital that we understand just how exactly fate works. However, before that, let's summarize everything so far. So, before the Void Century, the world was oppressed, with humans persecuting other races and oppressing each other, with rulers, kings, and tyrants attaining all the privilege, living as gods, while those below them suffered. Enter Joy Boy, a young man who set out to sea to become a pirate. Joy Boy valued freedom above all else. He wanted to be the freest man in the world, but he knew that he could only achieve that by bringing freedom to everyone else. Something that would only happen if he did away with the corrupt system of power and the discrimination that lied in the world. And so, he rallied the races of the world to fight for equality, founded a kingdom of pirates on the final island, and worked towards creating a tomorrow where all races could live under the same sun, the Dawn. But to do this, the Grand Line and the Red Line would have to be destroyed, so that all the oceans could be connected into the All Blue, and so that everyone could travel the seas freely as they wish, ushering a new tomorrow where everybody could be free and seek out adventure, the dawn of adventure, the Romance Dawn. However, the only way to destroy the Red Line and the Grand Line would be through the power of the ancient weapons. But during the war, the weapons were likely wiped out, and so the Alliance gained the advantage and Joy Boy's forces were slowly dwindled and wiped out. However, before they had been defeated, Joy Boy had already realized that they were done for. As Clover described, the Grey Kingdom realized they would be wiped out, and in that regard, Joy Boy understood that he could not bring the dawn himself, so he made preparations to ensure that someone would one day be able to carry it out. And so, the war came to an end. The Alliance was triumphant, and all of Joy Boy's allies had to seek refuge in places where they could survive, protecting the stones that they were gifted. The 20 kings came together and founded the World Government, an organization that would keep control of the world under an even tighter grip, doubling down on their oppression and becoming actual gods. They began a great act of censorship, killing many historians and witnesses, and destroying any records that remained of those times, wiping away an entire century's worth of information, also that Joy Boy's ideals would be forgotten. But Joy Boy and his allies had foreseen this, which is why they created the poneglyphs, so that someone one day could understand their dreams and carry them out. And furthermore, Joy Boy himself left something behind in order to ensure that those ideals would never disappear. The world government eradicated all traces of Joy Boy and his people. The island of the Great Kingdom was removed from all maps, and Joy Boy himself was likely executed. But, personally, I'd be willing to bet that even at the time of his execution, Joy Boy laughed. Because Joy Boy knew that he would not die. What if Joy Boy knew that the dawn would happen, and that he would one day reappear, not because he had confidence it would happen, but because it was already set in stone by fate? What if nothing in this world is a coincidence? This is undeniably a very hard topic to tackle, because I personally hate the concept of fate in narrative. The concept of the chosen one guided and supported by fate has personally always felt like a cheap narrative choice to me, especially in the realm of shonen where hard work and determination are always part of the core themes. Given how, just like in real life, you can't count on fate and luck to carry you and do everything for you, you need to put in the effort yourself. However, on the other hand, I simply cannot deny the fact that fate is a thing in the world of One Piece. We don't know if it's an actual force or a power by fact, but we do at least know that several characters strongly believe in it. And furthermore, there have been several elements in the story that might also lend credence to the fact that fate is a real power. Thus, I am left in quite a precarious situation, because on one hand, I believe in Oda as a writer, and I don't think he'll screw up so fundamentally by making Luffy the chosen one, but at the same time, as an analyst, I cannot reject the evidence, and as such, I have to tackle this subject. So I hope you can approach it with the same level of maturity and look at the evidence rather than just jump into the idea that Oda would never do this. I hope you can stick with me to the very end before you jump to any conclusions, because only then you might understand the full picture and really get what Oda is going for here. Because while this might seem like just a cheap narrative choice at first, personally, I think this might actually be a stroke of genius. Fate, destiny, and luck are all concepts that have been present in One Piece. These three words, while they do possess mildly different meanings in English, they are all basically synonyms in Japanese. The kanji for fate literally reads as lucky soul, and it plays into the idea that luck and coincidences are ordained by a bigger force of order. While it does share deep roots with Shintoism, this belief isn't necessarily rooted in religion and is widely spread across Japanese culture. It's one of the reasons why fortune readings and gambling are still massively popular in Japan compared to other countries, because people often want to test their fate, as well as why it is often written in as a narrative element in many manga, because it is a fundamental aspect of the culture, potentially even bigger than it is in a lot of Western countries. When it comes to One Piece, however, fate is a concept that is specifically tied to a certain element, the D clan. When Law asked Sengoku about his initial in Dressrosa, Sengoku thought the D are always following a checkered fate, and later in Onigashima, Law mused in front of a poneglyph, "I want to know about the meaning of this checkered fate." And even Yamato mentioned this after reading Oden's logbook. In many instances, Robin has realized that the D are strongly tied to the Void Century and to the mysteries of history, which is likely why the D clan itself is likely related to Joy Boy's people. But perhaps the biggest pieces of information we've gotten about the D come from Don Quixote Rocinante. Rocinante referred to the D as the Fateful Race, those guided by fate, and he also claimed that in a certain land the D are referred to as the natural enemies of the gods. Since the celestial dragons are viewed as gods, they fear that the D stand as their natural enemy, and so in Marijois, little celestial dragons are told that if they don't behave, a D will gobble them up, treating the D like a boogeyman of sorts. According to Rocinante, this is because the D have a philosophy that pits them against the gods, which makes sense because this is the same thing that Clover mentioned. Joy Boy and his people had an ideal that were against the idea of a select few ruling from the top as gods. It is possible that monarchs and tyrants of the Void Century view themselves as gods, much like the celestial dragons of today. We saw this with King Don Quixote, with how the Tontata described him. And so, in that regard, Joy Boy's ideals of equality is one that made him the natural enemy of the gods, as we've previously established, because in a world where everyone is equal, then there are no gods. Or what if, perhaps, some sort of entity described as a god who manipulated fate really did exist in the Void Century, and the D clan stood against it by manipulating fate themselves? Quite simply, do you believe in a higher power? Well, perhaps it's too early to think about that. Rocinante furthermore felt that the goal of the D clan was the destruction of the world, but even he indicated that such a term comes with a very different meaning of that of actual destruction and havoc. By destruction of the world, like we've established last episode, Rocinante was likely referring to the concept of turning the world upside down, by bringing the destruction of the Red Line and the Grand Line, destroying the current political system and bringing forth a new world, that which would come to be known as the Romance Dawn. That is likely what the D stands for, the Dawn Clan. The Dawn, as Rocinante put it, is their ultimate objective, to destroy the current world and allow it to be reborn under a new dawn that will unite everyone under the same sun. The idea of the D standing for Dawn is certainly one of the most popular theories today, but I was already considering this when Pedro first properly introduced the concept back in 2016, when I was already researching for this project, because even back then, it already made a lot of sense. After all, there is a certain element that people almost never consider when it comes to finding out what the D stands for, and it's the fact that One Piece is a Japanese manga, but the D is most likely an English word, much like things like One Piece or Laugh Tale, but as such, it needs to be an English word that is easy to understand for Japanese audiences, or, even more likely, an English word that has already been written in English in the manga itself, such as Dawn. Dawn is written in English on the cover of the very first chapter. even in the Japanese release. Oda could have easily just written it in Japanese, but he specifically wanted to write it in English. And it's something that extends to the volume version as well. One of the very first things you see when you pick up the manga for the first time will be the writing Romance Dawn. And as such, it's a word that is ingrained in the mind of any reader, even someone who might have little understanding of English. So, much more than any other option, Dawn simply makes the most sense to be the D. And, of course, this also ties with everything we've talked about, with Roshinante claiming that the D's ideals oppose the ideals of the Celestial Dragons, the same thing Clover cited as the reason for the world government's censorship of Joy Boy and his people's existence, and even Yamato, with knowledge of the journal, mentioned the Dawn shortly before talking about the D initial too. Everything we've learned so far seems to indicate that the D clan, likely the descendants of Joy Boy's people, are all fundamentally tied with the central idea of the Dawn. The ideal that the world government fears so much that his descendants hid this initial in their names. And it's each of these individual D members that in one way or another have all helped create a path towards turning the world upside down, weaving fate to do so. The interesting pattern between all the individuals who bear the D in their name is that while they all have played some role or another towards leading the world to its dawn, at least most of them don't seem to have done so consciously. So many of them have contributed in different ways towards leading to this dawn of the world, whether it's Law setting a path to defeat the Yonko, or Soul rescuing the last person capable of reading the Poneglyphs, or even the larger roles the likes of Ace have played in the story. Most of the D don't seem to be conscious about the fact that their actions are helping pave a path towards the dawn. So, if they are not creating this path to the dawn consciously, could this not be considered fate? And in the end, there is someone who has influenced this path towards the dawn more than anyone else. Of course, Monkey D. Luffy. This man is the central figure of everything, both as the main character of the story and the man who will one day follow in Joy Boy's footsteps. But that begs the question, then was Luffy's dream something he achieved out of his own strength? Or was he simply fated to be? Or just like Whoopsla put it all the way back in chapter 96, is it his dream or his fate? And perhaps no better example could serve to explain this than a scene that happens later in that same arc. Placed upon an execution stand, the very same Roger was executed on, Luffy is about to be beheaded when... out of nowhere, a lightning bolt strikes the plaza. In the perfect spot, at the perfect time, all in order to save Luffy's life. The chances for such a meteorological phenomenon to happen at such a perfect time are astronomically impossible. To be hit by a thunderbolt is rare, but to be hit at a point right before dying to be saved, it's too rare to really be just a coincidence. So was this really the work of coincidence, or that of fate? After seeing this, even Sanji pondered the existence of a god, and Smoker wondered if this is all just a coincidence, or if the heavens were trying to let Luffy live. Even Rayleigh eventually said the same thing. He wondered if there really was such a thing as a coincidence, thinking back to when Roger first met him donning that same straw hat. And there's a scene later in episode 969 of the anime that calls back to this and points out how odd this is. Roger, in his first meeting with Rayleigh, said that their meeting had to be fate. At that point, he even stated that he wanted to turn the world upside down, just like Joy Boy wanted to. But perhaps most striking of all is the fact that Roger was wearing a straw hat, a hat that Luffy would one day also wear. And this is particularly important because the implied national treasure of Marijois is exactly just that, a giant straw hat. What this straw hat really means is hard to say. If you personally ask me, I think it's as simple as this being Joy Boy's straw hat, a symbol of freedom, but the point I'm getting at is that even before his journey even began, Luffy was gifted a hat that not only pertained to the former Pirate King, but was potentially the same type of hat that Joy Boy once wore too, or at least a hat that is closely tied with the Void Sentry. And in that regard, both Roger and Luffy wearing this hat, can it really be called a coincidence? Even King Emu looked at the hat compared to Luffy's wanted poster and pondered to himself, could he be the one? Something like this hat already implies that Luffy isn't just a normal person. And of course, this is not accounting that Luffy was born a member of the D clan. The D isn't an honorary title or anything, we've seen it passed down in biological relationships, so from the very start, Luffy was already born as someone special. Even the Sea Kings seemed to foresee the date around which Luffy and Shirahoshi would be born, though this could simply be a form of clairvoyance like the one Shirley had, since she also predicted Shirahoshi's birth, which I personally consider to just be a form of advanced future sight, so I don't think this necessarily indicates anything. But if we go back to that lining scene, we start to realize that there are plenty of other scenes all across the series that are just like it. Points where Luffy should definitely have died, but he is saved at the very last moment. To put just a few examples, in Alabasta, when he is defeated by Crocodile and buried into the ground, it's Robin who saves him from death. Had she not been there at the right time, Luffy would have likely died. And at that point, Robin asked Luffy, "Those of you who carry the name D, why do you fight? Just who are you people?" At Enies lobby, right as the Straw Hats were about to die and with no way of escape, Mary came in to save them at just the right second. Had him pulled down, Luffy was fatally poisoned, yet he managed to be saved by the one of the very few men who could save him in such a situation. Even Ivankov mentioned that Luffy's chances would only go from 0% to 2-3%, something incredibly rare to happen. At Marineford, he was saved countless times from the nick of death by countless people, and even at the very end, where it seemed like he couldn't escape, Law came in to his rescue, a member of the D clan, and Kobe's speech and later Shanks' arrival are what gave him enough time to slip away, something that happened by mere seconds, and even Shanks himself remarked that, whether for the better or the worse, this moment now has greatly changed the fate of the world. At Dressrosa, there were several points where Luffy was about to die, yet he ended up being saved in the nick of time. On his way to Whole Cake Island, Luffy once again ended up being poisoned by a deadly toxin, one that was about to kill him. Yet coincidentally, one of the only people who could have saved his life, one of the very few people in the entire world who could remove the toxins from him that fast, just happened to be there. And it wasn't because they had an interest in meeting him, no. They specifically stated they wanted to meet Sanji, but they coincidentally happened to miss him and ended up meeting Luffy instead. And of course, Luffy meeting Law and Kinemon at Pang Hazard eventually led him to the path to defeat the Yonko, and in getting the Road Poneglyphs. Had he not met them on that island, would he have ever ended up at Wano? Especially since Ace before him also ended up making the same promise of defeating Kaido. Even CP0 later remarked how all of these seemed like an act of fate. Can all of these be called coincidences? Sure, some of them might be, but several others just can't be. This isn't just plot armor or narrative convenience, there's no such convenience as a lightning bolt falling in place at the right time, there's no such thing as being saved from the nick of death at the right instant, again and again and again and again. There are countless other examples I could make, but they always lead to Luffy surviving under unbelievable circumstances. And this isn't considering the luck Luffy has had in general, whether it's someone like Robin ending up on his crew, literally the last person alive capable of reading the poneglyphs, all thanks to the efforts of a member of the D-Clan saving her life, or whether it's Trafalgar Law, another member of the D-Clan setting Luffy on the right route to defeat the Yonko and attain all the road poneglyphs, or the many allies who have helped Luffy on his journey. I'm sorry, but no matter how you put it, it almost feels like none of this was achieved by Luffy's own efforts, but by all the help that others have given him. But then, does that mean that everything so far was meaningless? Was Luffy just born to become the Pirate King? Was he blessed with the D in his name from birth? Was he given his hat because Shanks knew he would be the chosen one? Is Luffy the reincarnation of Joy Boy, or simply the chosen one meant to carry out this prophecy? Well, before we answer all this, to better understand the situation, I would suggest we take a look at our individual who is so deeply tied with fate as much as Luffy. Blackbeard. From the time he was introduced, Blackbeard is someone who has shown to deeply believe in fate. He mentioned that how things develop is nothing more than an act of fate, and his crewmate Doc Q remarked that fate is what measures a man's worth at all moments. In fact, we saw Doc Q offering Luffy a basket of apples, some of which were rigged with explosives, but Luffy ended up eating a good apple. Doc Q remarked how Luffy is blessed by luck. indicating that he was testing Luffy's fate. Even later in Impel Down, on their way to level 6, Blackbeard and his men were caught in Magellan's deadly toxin and were about to die. Yet by pure chance, or perhaps fate, Shiryu arrived just in time, happening to carry an antidote with him. He remarked that if it hadn't been for this coincidence, Blackbeard's crew might have all died, but Augur mentioned that his appearance was an act of fate, with Tish exclaiming that "Those who fear are the losers, you should live in the moment," indicating that one should trust in their own fate and move forward with conviction. But no instance is potentially more telling than the clash between Ace and Blackbeard at Banaro Island. Blackbeard claimed that him killing Thatch was a twist of fate, one that led him to this point, allowing him to become darkness itself. And on the other hand, you have someone like Ace, who wielded the power of fire, which symbolizes the sun. Ace created a copy of the sun to fight Blackbeard, symbolizing the dawn itself, the rise of the sun. In this case, this was a lot more than just a clash between pirates. It was a clash between the flames of the sun, the flames of the dawn, and the darkness of the night. Blackbeard right then and there declared to Ace that he wanted to become the Pirate King, and to him that meant not bringing the dawn, but to conquer the world. Standing in stark contrast to both Ace and Luffy's ideal, these are two opposite ideals that were clashing against each other. The clash between Blackbeard and Ace would unavoidably determine the fate of how things would move forward in the future. The dusk or the dawn, which would prevail? If Ace won, then Blackbeard would be defeated, eradicating this big threat from the world. Blackbeard won, and, well, we already know what happened. But that's the thing, both outcomes were possible. As the battle unfolded, Augur remarked, "Today is yet another of fate's crossroads." To him, this was a crossroads of fate. These are two different fates clashing against each other, either of which could have won, and in the end, Blackbeard was the one who came out on top, sure, but there was every chance that Ace could have won himself. In other words, it means that fate is not set in stone. The D have shown that they have the power to guide fate, but how they guide it is up to them. They aren't destined to have things go their way, they make things go their way. Roshinante remarked the very same thing, claiming that Law had managed to escape his deadly fate and marked a new fate for himself. The reason why Roshinante didn't want Law to follow Doflamingo is because he was afraid that he would let Doflamingo rise to the position of Pirate King through his powers, someone who, much like Blackbeard, would have sent the world falling into darkness. The dawn of the world is far from guaranteed. There are those who have the ability to lead the world to its dawn, sure, but there are also those who can lead it to an even darker night. Some seek to free and others seek to conquer. These two opposite fates cannot coexist. One of them will have to prevail over the other, and it will be these crossroads of fate that will represent the final struggle of the series. But the one that will prevail in the end will not be the one blessed by the heavens, but the one whose will shall be strong enough to carve their own fate. None of Luffy's struggles so far have been the work of sheer luck or fate. This conflict will bring about a big war, potentially the biggest the world has ever seen, as Oden put it. This will result in a colossal storm, both figuratively and likely literally, a conflict that will engulf the world like an unstoppable storm. This is likely the storm that the D will bring again that the celestial dragons always fear, and the same storm that is mentioned across the series and can even be found present in many of the lyrics of many of the openings. This storm will result in the eventual eradication of the celestial dragon system, so regardless of if it will lead to a path of light or to a path of darkness, the celestial dragons will fall. And it's quite fitting that one of the central people trying to change the political system is a member of the D clan, with the ability to create actual storms. Something that's been set up since as early as East Blue. And it will be after this dark storm and a really difficult struggle that finally the sun will rise again. As long as we keep believing in Luffy, I'm certain he will be able to bring forth a new dawn. Sure, without this ability to manipulate fate, much like the other D, maybe Luffy would have never gotten to where he is, and that is important to acknowledge. But at the same time, he would have never gotten anywhere if it weren't for his determination or willingness to never give up. Had Luffy decided to give up at any point, fate wouldn't have carried him to becoming the Pirate King. His adventures would have ended there. Every battle, every struggle, every challenge was overcome from Luffy's own strength, from his determination to never give up. The reason why Luffy passed the true 3% chances of surviving Magellan's toxin wasn't just due to meeting Ivankov, but as Ivankov himself put it, from Luffy's own willpower to survive. It's something Luffy achieved on his own, and it's at that point that Ivankov remarked,
一度は死ぬと決まった運命に逆らうことがどれほどのことか。奇跡なめんじゃないよ!
Everything Luffy has achieved so far, every miracle that has blessed him, was not just the work of fate alone. It was the very fate that he himself carved, and the hard work that he put in order to carry it out. But that still doesn't answer exactly what this fate is. And that is something that is hard to answer definitively. Maybe it really is just a power that kind of exists, or perhaps it has a set origin. Maybe it's a manifestation of Haki, willpower so strong that it even weaves fate itself. Or maybe it really is just all superstition and just pure coincidence. But like many things we've explored, it's not so much about how it came to exist, but why it exists. What I'm essentially getting at is that regardless of what fate ends up being, regardless of what it is that pushes the D, it is not fate that controls them, but they are the ones who write fate itself. It is through their actions, their decisions, that they are able to create fate. As Blackbeard put it, fate is what measures a man's worth at all moments. When Sengoku talked about Roshinante's actions, despite claiming that they follow a checkered fate, he also told Law that Roshinante's actions were not driven by a larger purpose. He told Law not to try and attach a meaning to Roshinante's love, indicating that he simply helped Law because he loved him. Roshinante helped Law change his fate, but the source of these actions were nothing simpler than love. And similarly, someone like Saul, while he also ended up forging a path towards fate, he didn't betray the Marines because it was his destiny, but he did it because he felt it was the right thing. And it was his love for Robin that saved her life. Rouge saved her son's life not because it was important for the dawn of the world, but because it was her kid. Because she loved him. So on and so forth. The action of all these individuals were not driven by some ulterior motive, but simply by the conviction of their own personal ideals. They created their own fates. And there might be no better example to describe this than Luffy's encounter with Oracle, Mihawk, and Marineford. As Mihawk drew his blade, he stated, "Now, Fate, let us see how you favor the shining star of the next generation. Will his life end here, or will you save it from my black blade?" Literally stating to test Luffy's fate. Despite attempting to seriously kill him, it's through the help of his allies that Luffy managed to get away and once again survive. And at that point, Mihawk realized, explaining just what exactly this power of fate really is.
その場にいる者たちを次々に自分の味方につける。
その調子だぶれよ、麦わらボーイ。
切り抜けたようじゃな。
ルフィ、兄上をお助けするのじゃ。
この海においてあの男は最も恐るべき力を持っている。
Because that's quite simply what Luffy's power of fate is. It's not so much the ability to write destiny itself, but to connect with people, to draw in people who will help him go on the right path. Think back to all those times, such as when Luffy was struck by the lightning at Lockdown. Was that simply fate saving him? Or was that the power of Monkey D. Dragon, who used his Delphic powers to save Luffy from that execution? It was Robin who saved Luffy from the sand at Alabasta. Mary came in to save them at just the right second. It was Ivankov who helped Luffy survive at Impel Down. It was Scobie and Shanks who saved Luffy from Marineford and all the other allies who protected him. It was all the allies at Dressrosa who helped save Luffy. Everybody who came together so that Luffy could defeat Doflamingo. It was Reiju who saved Luffy from poison. It was Kinemon and Law who guided Luffy to Wano. All of these individuals have saved Luffy because Luffy has the ability to connect with people. He has the power to have others trust in him, to believe in him, and to help him out in turn. As Luffy said during Arlong Park, he knows he can't do everything alone, and like he told Bullet in Stampede, there is no point in chasing for the path to the top alone. Luffy's crewmates, his nakama, his allies, his friends, all the bonds he has created and connected with are the most important thing in the world to him. They are his most important treasure, more than even his own hat. Luffy needs others to help him out, and there's nothing wrong with that. Life isn't meant to be fought through power alone. That is what friends are for. The path to the pinnacle can't be achieved by one's own strength alone, but through the help of the bonds that one has forged. Above anything else, that is potentially one of the most fundamental themes of One Piece. Perhaps Oda will prove me wrong and I'm just being too faithful and hopeful in his writing, and I'm just being too optimistic. Ultimately, it doesn't really change anything in the grand scheme of things if Luffy was the chosen one or not, but for the sake of good writing, I think it makes so much more sense for Luffy to be truly free, even free from destiny itself. Luffy wasn't given his straw hat by Shanks because he knew he was the chosen one. Shanks chose to bet on him. Shanks saw in Luffy the same dream that Roger had, the dream to throw the biggest party in the world, and it was that which led him to place his bet on Luffy. It was Luffy's own ability to make Shanks trust in him that set him on the route towards his dream, and it's everyone else who has chosen to believe in him across that journey that have helped set Luffy on his path to one day finally become the Pirate King. And that is exactly as Rayleigh put it all along.
この世には偶然などないのかもしれない。すべてが必然であるかのように。縁はやおら形を成してゆく。とかく、ルフィはまた一段とあの帽子がよく似合う男になった。
But that is a story no one yet knows about.